All right. Thank you, Maddie. I'm Janae Hanger. I'm the president of the Children's Policy and Law Initiative of Indiana, and we're really glad to have all of you here today. What we want to talk about is certain gun legislation that is moving pretty quickly in Indiana that we believe will place more children in the adult system. And specifically, the bills that we're concerned with are Senate Bill 197, House Bill 1256, and House Bill 1369. I think through the course of this press conference that you'll learn a little bit more from the youth perspective and also from a public health perspective about why we are so concerned about this legislation. And we hope that everybody here will understand why we need to propose amendments to these bills so that we can amendments to eliminate gun offenses from the direct file statute so that we can actually have gun offenses start or begin in the juvenile system. So we will have more explanation on the bill very shortly, but I wanted to introduce Sarah Williams. Sarah is the policy director for McCoy. Sarah, do you want to say hello to everybody?
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for the introduction, Janae. I'm Sarah. I'm the Public Policy and Advocacy Director at McCoy. I just wanted to say a few comments before we get started. For those of you who don't know McCoy, our vision is that every young person in Indiana has opportunities to thrive, learn, engage, and contribute. And so we're really pleased to join all of our fellow coalition members here today to support these amendments for Senate Bill 197 and House Bills 1256 and 1369. Our hope is to remove these gun offenses off the direct file statute. Because ultimately we know that children in adult facilities are often kept in isolation to protect them from predatory inmates. They're 5 times more likely to be sexually assaulted, 9 times more likely to die by suicide. And once released, they have a 34% chance that they're more likely to commit additional and more violent offenses. And so by keeping children in juvenile facilities, we're investing in them and their future, and we're investing in our community as a whole. So we're ultimately giving these kids a chance to learn, grow, and re-enter society as engaged and contributing citizens, which is what our hope is at McCoy. So thanks to everybody for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to a good discussion and looking forward to hearing from some of the legal experts and other community leaders and young people who have lived experience with this. So thanks, Johnny.
Thank you, Sarah. I want to now introduce Joel Winnecke. Joel Winnecke is senior attorney over at the Indiana Public Defender Council, and he's going to explain all 3 bills and how they interact with one another to increase the number of children who are in the adult system. Joel, did you want to go ahead and start?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Joel Winnecke. I am a senior staff attorney. I don't feel very senior, but that's what they've entitled me. I work on juvenile justice issues for the Indiana Public Defender Council. And the Public Defender Council is called upon by statute to be a legislative liaison to guide and consult with the legislature on criminal justice matters. So the 3 bills that you should have all seen in your invitation to attend today's press conference that we're focused on would be Senate Bill 197, House Bill 1256, and House Bill 1369. And 2 of those I want to address together. The Senate Bill 197 and 1256, House Bill 1256, those have the exact same provisions in them. And the provisions do this. They reinstate juvenile court jurisdiction over this thing that we call children and firearms. The reason for the legislation is there was a Supreme Court decision earlier this year saying that the way the statute was written previously it didn't lead to juvenile court jurisdiction over these crimes that we call bundled together in this concept called children and firearms. I think for the most part, and I'm speaking for Public Defender Council, I may not speak for everyone, we support the juvenile court having authority over children and firearms offenses. The leading offense that we're talking about is dangerous possession of a firearm. And that word dangerous is a legislative creation because the bill that law itself doesn't require any criminal intent for the use of the firearm. It's just the mere possession of the firearm, and the legislature has assigned that word dangerous to that possession because kids are different. We all know that kids are impulsive, kids are reactionary, kids don't fully understand the consequences of their actions. So that's why we have these special statutes empowering juvenile courts to address concerning behavior when kids come into possession of firearms. House Bill 1369 is another bill that's moving through. It passed out of the House already. The main thrust of that bill is to remove the requirement for adults to have to get a permit to be able to carry a handgun. In order to do that and to be consistent with the law, they also added, there's another provision in the bill that adults won't have to get a permit, but if a child carries a handgun, then that child is committing a criminal offense by doing so. And so as long as that's empowering the juvenile court to address that behavior by a child, because children are different and children don't understand the consequences of their actions, we're okay with that. But the reason why we're here today is there's another statute called the direct file statute, and it deals with serious violent offenses: attempted murder, kidnapping, rape, and robbery. But in addition to those offenses, it also deals with these two forms of firearms offenses directed at kids and kids alone. Carrying a handgun without a license, if charged as a felony currently, but in House Bill 1369, it will be that offense if it's committed with another crime. And then children and firearms if charged as a felony. Is what it does. So direct file it's talking about using those offenses to skip the juvenile court altogether and directly file those offenses into the adult criminal court. So it's a complicated legal concept in some regards, following this process through, but as what's happening, I think is a very simple thing that we can really digest. Kids with firearms are different because they don't understand the consequences. So we have special laws addressing how they interact with firearms in order to deal with that. When we use these special laws as a process to push those kids directly into adult court as a down the road consequence, we're using our understanding that kids are different to lead to a pathway to where they're prosecuted as an adult. Had they been an adult, these offenses would not have been crimes. They're only offenses because they're children. And so that's what we're really concerned about, is these trying to remove the firearms offenses that don't have an additional criminal act attached to them, like armed robbery or something like that, but that the mere possession be removed from the direct file statute. And the reality that kids are different shouldn't be used as a basis to lead to the prosecution of kids as adults. And is that a good primer, Janae? Do you want to move on with somebody else now?
That's a very good primer. Thank you, Joel. But we encourage you to chime in here anytime you want, Joel.
I will okay. Help out the best I can.
And please help us with the questions. We appreciate that. The next person I want to introduce is Tiffany Davis. Tiffany is an injury prevention coordinator at a local trauma center, and she's also one of the key stakeholders involved in the Marion County Youth Violence Prevention Coalition. So Tiffany, are you here?
Yes, I am here.
All right, thank you.
All right, good afternoon. As Jonae said, my name is Tiffany Davis, and I am speaking on behalf of my role as an injury prevention coordinator at a level 1 trauma center in downtown Indianapolis. So Thank you for your time today. Thank you for listening to this important conversation. And I'm here today to share some public health perspectives. First, just regarding kind of the firearm-related injuries and deaths from a public health perspective and some data. Firearm-related injuries are a leading cause of death in both our country and in our state. In 2019, the U.S. saw over 39,000 firearm deaths, 60% of those suicide and 36% homicide. Indiana saw over 950 of those firearm deaths, with very similar rates of suicide and homicide. Non-fatal firearm injuries exist in much greater numbers than fatal injuries. The CDC calculated there to be over 23,000 years of potential life lost in Indiana in 2019 for firearm-related deaths. They state that firearm violence costs the U.S. tens of billions of dollars each year in medical costs and lost productivity alone. And this is the public health issue that we are trying to do something about. However, the direct file statute for juveniles with firearm offenses does not align with public health best practices. We know that adverse childhood experiences, also referred to as potentially traumatic experiences during childhood, have a tremendous impact on violence, victimization, perpetration, and lifelong health and opportunity. We also know that effective prevention and intervention strategies include promoting social norms that protect against violence and adversity, teaching skills, connecting youth to caring adults and activities, and intervening to lessen immediate and long-term harms. The services which research is showing us to be protective toward firearm violence in America align directly with the services that the juvenile system can provide. Charging our youth in juvenile court will allow for school and other age-appropriate resources, potential conditions to ensure public safety upon release, and access to community-based services to ensure supervision and promote positive development. Adult court services are not able to provide these unique opportunities for our youth, such as appropriate educational programs and resources that are geared towards the immediate and long-term needs of children. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. Let's see, where are we at? I want to introduce Ashley Thomas at this time. She is, I'm not sure I'm going to get your title correct, Ashley, so I think you're going to have to fill me in on this. I believe you're the parent coordinator, advocacy coordinator for Stanford Children. Stanford Children is an important partner in the Indiana Coalition for Youth Justice. And Ashley, you are going to introduce one of your parents who has a story to share. Would you like to do that introduction right now?
Yes. My name is Ashley Thomas. I'm the Regional Organizing Director for Stanford Children, Indiana. And thank you, Janae. I'm really excited about this introduction because what I have to say is like nothing compared to his incredible story. But he is a father who has been in our network and he's worked with us for a very long time. He's done a lot of incredible things in the community as well. And it was just interesting how we found out how these particular bills and issues in our youth justice system has affected his life. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Dante Dyson. He goes by Don to be able to tell his story because he's going to tell it better than me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry. My name is Dante Dyson. And I'm here today because as someone who's faced gun possession charges at a young age, and as someone who carried a gun as a child, I think it is very important that you hear my story and understand why I want to see the SB 197 and HB 1256 and HB 1369 amended to eliminate gun possession offenses for a direct file statute. Growing up, it wasn't unusual for me to hear things like, I would rather be safe than sorry, or I would rather be judged by.
He muted himself.
Don, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I think you might have to repeat though.
I will. I'll start over. Someone tried to call me, and I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
Now, where I was at was growing up for me. It wasn't unusual for me to hear things like, "I'd rather be safe than sorry," or I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. A lot of kids in my neighborhood were raised without parents around. My area was a HUD houses, Section 8, and generally what you expect to see in areas with a lot of poverty. It was almost an unwritten law that you needed to learn about guns, carry one, or make people believe that you had one in your possession if you didn't want it to be bothered, targeted, or harmed. I learned too young that it was dangerous being a Black man, not only in Indianapolis, but in America. I am not a violent person. I have never been, but that was my life at the time, and everything in it was centered around protecting myself. When I started carrying a gun, it was for protection and driven by trauma. And I was not old enough to have a permit. I had no intentions of ever hurting a soul, and I never did. But when I was freshly 18 and about to apply for a gun permit, I was pulled over on my way to the movie store. I told the police officer right away about the gun. I was embarrassed because there was other guys in the car with me, and I was scared because I wasn't sure what was the next step for me. I was a child who had not even graduated high school yet. Putting me in a jail cell, stripping me, searching me, and then meeting other grown men coming directly from prison to the county jail, that result changed and impacted my life and was a very big influence on it. And it sent it in the opposite direction that I wanted it to go. It seemed like I just kept catching petty cases after that. And at no time did anyone ever ask me what was the reason that such a young kid had a gun. It was assumed that I was violent. There are a lot of young kids who have guns and shouldn't, and I'm not here to argue that it's okay for young people to carry guns. I'm not condoning my prior actions. I am simply trying to educate others as to why some young people carry guns. But placing them in an adult facility is not going to help them. It will hurt them through, and to be clear, making laws tougher or penalties more severe will not have the preventative impact on these young persons' decision to carry a gun. But having the right supports and help in place to deal with the underlying reasons that they're carrying a gun can help. A lot of these kids with guns, they are scared just like I was. They have trauma just like I did, and they need someone to help them, either in a juvenile facility or through other programs, our big brothers and sisters. They stand a chance of getting that help in adult. They don't stand a chance to get that help in adult facilities. They won't. They will be more scared and more traumatized than ever, and all of the other reasons that they needed to carry a gun will be legitimized. So please do not directly file young kids and facing possession charges into the adult jails. These kids need more help, and they can get the help, and their lives will be changed.
Now I'm talking and I'm muted, but thank you so much. We really appreciate you sharing those insights. And I'm sure there may be people that have questions. So I want to just encourage all the speakers to please, hang around, and we'll answer your questions later. I want to introduce Dr. Sarah Stelzner. She's been a big ally, along with her organization, the Indiana chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Dr. Stelzner, are you here? Sure you are.
Yes, she's here.
All right, thank you.
Sure. Just trying to get my setup here. Sorry, I had to be outside in order to not wear my mask. So thank you for inviting me here. Some of my comments overlap with the prior speakers. They've said it in very eloquent ways, so I'll try to shorten my piece here. But we know that trying and sentencing children in the adult system is not a developmentally appropriate or trauma-informed justice response to youth in trouble with the law, and will not improve public safety. In fact, it would roll back much of the progress already made in Indiana's juvenile justice system over the last decade. Children and adolescents who become involved with the justice system often do so with complex medical, mental health, developmental, social, and legal needs. Most have been exposed to childhood trauma or adversity, which both contributes to their involvement with the justice system and negatively impacts their health and well-being, as spoken to by our prior speaker. Research has established, as mentioned previously, the impact of trauma and ACEs, and we know that over 90% of youth in the justice system have experienced at least one form of childhood trauma. Youth who are likely victims of trauma themselves are not well served and in fact can be made worse in the adult courts, where punishment, not rehabilitation, is the primary purpose of incarceration. Research in adolescent development shows that children and youth are more amenable to treatment and intervention than adults. However, in the adult system, children are not afforded the services that provide opportunities to mitigate toxic stress, acquire critical skills, competencies, and experiences essential to their success as adults. Youth still have developing brains that are very resilient in the right settings with stable, protective adult relationships. These youth need education, skills training, these stable adult relationships, protective adult relationships, in order to be rehabilitated, decrease recidivism, and improve public safety. And this is clearly not available in the adult courts or justice system. Tragically, children and youth are 5 times more likely to be sexually assaulted, up to 9 times more likely to commit suicide, and have a 2-fold increase in likelihood of being attacked with a weapon by other inmates or beaten by staff in adult facilities than those who are in juvenile facilities. It is unacceptable to put any child or youth in an environment with this level of risk. Furthermore, placement in isolation or solitary confinement to protect them from these assaults causes permanent and detrimental impacts on mental, physical health, and brain development. Children who are tried in adult courts are 34% more likely to commit additional and more violent offenses than those children treated for similar offenses in the juvenile system due to lack of rehabilitative services in the adult system. The dangers that I discussed previously that obviously cause further toxic stress to these developing brains, as well as the collateral consequences of criminal conviction that disadvantage youth opportunities and undermines our communities. These consequences include barriers to obtaining school loans, education, employment, joining the military, gaining housing, voting, and other essential aspects of rehabilitation into a successful life. And as a consequence, these children or youth are more likely to reoffend once they are released without hope, social capital, or stable, protective adult relationships. Finally, we know that direct file disproportionately impacts minority youth in Indiana, and the Indiana chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics opposes any effort that will exacerbate the mass incarceration of youth of color. We must have a system that utilizes culturally responsive, trauma-informed, and developmental approaches that is based on the science of brain development to develop our juvenile justice system. Research has shown that such an approach lowers recidivism rates, promotes public safety, and leads to improved outcomes for children. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stelzner. I want to introduce Kathy Clements. She is the president of the Indiana Conference of United Methodist Women.
Thank you, Janae, and good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be able to speak to you on behalf of United Methodist Women of Indiana. I represent over 8,000 United Methodist women in Indiana and over 800,000 United Methodist women throughout the country who are dedicated to advocating for women, children, and youth for social justice. One of our goals is to interrupt the school-to-prison pipeline. On behalf of our faith-based organization, I would like to speak concerning 3 pending bills involving gun offenses in the Indiana General Assembly that expand the current legal pathways for direct filing children into adult court. Senate Bill 197 and House Bills 1256 and 1369. As mothers, grandmothers, aunts, and sisters, we're aware that 16 and 17-year-olds are not adults. They do not reason as adults, nor do they often understand the long-term consequences of their actions. The juvenile court system was designed to address the behaviors of youth and to provide rehabilitation that could change their lives and set them on a course for positive change. United Methodist Women of Indiana encouraged the Indiana legislature to amend these bills to remove gun possession offenses from the direct file statute. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. I want to introduce Marcy Mistrett. She is the senior fellow at the Sentencing Project. She's also the former executive director for the Campaign for Youth Justice. In her prior role with the Campaign for Youth Justice, she worked across the country to reduce the number of children in adult facilities. And I think she can speak to the impact that she and other advocates have had and the trends that we see now moving away from using adult sanctions to address needs of youth.
Thanks, Janae. And hi, everybody. Thank you for having me today. As Janae said, since 2014, I ran a national organization called the Campaign for Youth Justice. And we focused on getting young people out of the adult criminal legal system. And I think we've heard very consistently today why these bills, while good because they are starting children in juvenile court, which is the court system that is established to deal with delinquent behavior, they are also, perhaps unintentionally, but definitely will influence the number of children who are directly filed into adult court. So I want to urge the Indiana legislature to really think about bringing us back to what the purpose of the juvenile court has always been for the past 125 years. It has been created to win in the recognition that children are different, and it has created special protections and statutes that ensure that children with appropriate supports and by engaging their families can be rehabilitated. Indeed, when run appropriately, these juvenile justice systems do lead and support children, the vast majority of whom who outgrow their delinquent behavior in their early 20s. I want to reiterate what Tiffany Davis said in terms of why a public health initiative is much better way to go than just a punitive response to firearm-related behaviors. We know that young people oftentimes that come in contact with the law have themselves been exposed to and victimized by violence. We know that 80% of children in the juvenile justice system have 3 or more adverse childhood experiences. This compares with only about 12% of the overall youth population in the country. I also want to support and raise up again Mr. Dyson's experience. His experience is an experience that we see all over the country, and again, an experience that is much more likely to come to light in the juvenile court when asked and appropriately placed in front of a juvenile judge that can weigh the individual factors of that child's experience and find out why that child felt that they needed to be in possession of a handgun. It also appropriately can direct that child to services so that we can begin to to properly weigh the risk assessments to ensure that that child can remain safe in community and get the services that they need. But to pass these bills without also addressing how they will expand Indiana's direct file statute is completely problematic, and it goes against both research and trends that we've seen across the country. First, 23 states across the country have changed their laws in recent years to ensure that young people are not directly placed in the adult system, but instead are placed in the juvenile courts where a judge can individually review the situation around them and the facts of the case and surround them with services that will make them more likely to be successful and not come in contact with the law again. What we find and what research has unequivocally proven is that direct file makes our communities less safe. When we directly place children into the adult system, they are 34% more likely to be rearrested more quickly and with more serious crimes than children with the exact same arrests that are retained in juvenile court. Secondly, I think we've also heard that direct file, and this stands true in Indiana, disproportionately impacts children of color. We know that children who live in high crime neighborhoods are often come in contact with the police more often. And despite the fact that research has shown that children engage in delinquent behavior at roughly the same rates, no matter what the delinquent behavior is, we know that children of color, and particularly Black boys, are punished more severely and more harshly and for longer periods of time than white children who engage in the same behavior. In Indiana, that is 80% of the children who end up in the adult criminal courts are children of color. So we do not want to perpetuate anything that drives young people who are engaging in similar behaviors further and further into an adult system that was not designed to intervene with their behavior or to help them with skill development to keep them out of it. And then fourth, and I think we've already heard this as well, when children go into the adult system, they are forever considered an adult by the law. And that is a problem. This means that young people can't get access a lot of times to federal aid to go to college. They cannot join or advance in the military. They can oftentimes not get access to housing. These records become a permanent scar. And so that is another reason that we really want a juvenile court judge to be looking fully at an entire hearing, to look at all of the facts of the case before they make that very, very critical decision. I think I'm going to skip over the part about the physical harms that children face while in adult system. I feel like everyone has touched on that. It is a brutalizing and traumatizing experience for other adults. Nevertheless, other children who are treated as adults, it has been shown over and over again. They don't understand what they are facing. They don't understand how serious the charges are, and they certainly don't understand the violence that they confront once they get into the adult system. And finally, I want to just say that we are not absolving children of any responsibility. We are simply asking that the juvenile court, which is the appropriate court, weigh all of these factors together and make a determination on a case-by-case basis. So with that, I would just urge the Indiana legislature to please look at these children as children, keep them in the juvenile court, give them a robust hearing that is based on facts and not just fear, and ensure that they get the services they need to be successful and keep their community safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcy. We really appreciate that. I also want to introduce another national expert. We're very fortunate to have two here today. Maya Fernandez. Maya is with the Justice Policy Institute. She's a nationally known victims advocate, and she's a former prosecutor. Maya?
Maya, you're muted.
Sorry. I just want to say thank you to you, Janae, and thank you to all of you here. I come to you as a former prosecutor from the Manhattan DA's office. I put away bad guys with guns in jail on a regular basis. I'm also the former executive director of the National Center for Victims of Crime. I spent 10 years there, and there was many occasions that I sat with a family who had lost a loved one to gun violence. All that being said, violent crime is a real thing in America, and we have to do everything we can to stop it. to enhance the ways that young people end up in adult court is not the way to do it. It simply brings more harm than it brings any good, either to that young person or to the community at large. As you know, Don talked about in his testimony, and others have talked about, you know, more than often, young people carry guns for self-protection. I also worked as a community advocate and saw that happen over and over again. The youth in Indiana who are charged with gun possession come from the most violent communities in Indiana. It makes sense they want to protect themselves and want to have a gun. I'm not condoning that. That's a bad decision on their part. However, there is the reality that their homes aren't safe, their schools aren't safe, walking in the street is not safe. So they do what they can. They think that by owning a gun, that puts them into a safe place, which it may not. It usually does not. In addition, 2 or 3 years ago, the organization I'm currently working with, the Justice Policy Institute, which is a justice reform organization, got together with my old organization, the National Center for Victims of Crime, to put together a report that said this: young people, even if they're charged with a violent crime, can be at very low risk of committing other kinds of crime. And therefore, they're definitely better treated in the community, but definitely not in adult court. These young people can be given all of the services they need in community-based situations where they're well supervised, and ensuring that they get to a better place in life rather than continuing to commit crimes. The research is clear, as many of you have said, and the facts are clear. Putting a young person, first of all, they're going to serve shorter sentences. So if somebody is looking for a piece of flesh, they're not going to get that by placing a young person in an adult court. They'll get a lower sentence. However, they'll be much more at risk. And we've heard of all the devastating things that can happen in adult court. And therefore, when that person gets out, our communities are going to be in worse situation. It's just not smart to create these additional laws that put young people in adult jail. It's not bringing the prevention we need, the reduction in the violence, and the ability for kids to be able to be kids and make mistakes and get the help they can. They can get that through the juvenile system. So I'm asking the Indiana legislature to think about what they're doing. These laws are not going to get them what they want. They're not fair and they're not smart.
Thank you, Maya. Next, we've got Mark Russell from the Indianapolis Urban League. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Janae. Good afternoon, everyone. The Indianapolis Urban League would like to thank the Indiana Coalition for Youth Justice for assembling a broad coalition to modernize Indiana's juvenile justice system, to move from a system of blind punishment to one that recognizes that children should not be punished like adults because of their ongoing brain development, and that the goals of social correction should be rehabilitative in nature and not punitive. The Indianapolis Urban League supports the proposed amendments to Senate Bill 197 and House Bills 1256 and 1369, so that less children, particularly children of color, are prosecuted as adults, and that they be provided with age-appropriate supervision, services, and opportunities to correct their mistaken behavior. The coalition asked myself and the Indianapolis Urban League today to speak on specifically issues of disproportionality, which some speakers have already addressed. Directly filing gun possession charges into adult court for juveniles is already documented to disproportionately impact 16 and 17-year-old Black children, who constitute 69% of such charges, and all children of color are 83.5% of such filings. Black children in Indiana are only 14% of Indiana's juvenile population, but account for nearly 36% of cases in juvenile court. Children are less culpable for their actions and more capable of rehabilitation as their brain development in areas of reasoning and self-control are not fully developed, often until their mid-20s. Indiana does not need more children facing obstacles resulting from a criminal record that includes barriers to housing, education, employment, and military service, among others. A lot of our children are depending upon us. It's time for us to get busy for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. I want to introduce Brandon Randall, Voices Corp.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brandon Randall. I'm the Director of Engagement here at Voices Corp. I wanted to give a different perspective on why we need to address this issue. So one of the programs that we have here at Voices is our day reporting program. Our day reporting program started in May of 2017, and from that day until today, we have served almost 400 young people just in that program alone. That program is where we receive referrals through juvenile court, the Department of Child Services, and sometimes a combination of the two. Of the almost 400 students that we have been able to serve, all but 3 have been young males. 2/3 of them have came to us with some sort of gun charge. What we have seen is amazing leadership from these young people, despite their charges, despite the neighborhoods that they have came from. We have seen an overwhelming amount of students who have been able to earn their high school equivalency diploma, many of which were 16 when they earned that. We've had an abundance of students who have served as co-facilitators at community-based conferences, served on public policy summits, spoken on economic, interpersonal, and systemic trauma. We've had students who have gotten jobs, and we have had students who have been able to apply and be successfully enrolled in college. None of that would have been able to happen if those students would have been directly filed to adult court. The whole reason that we are all here today is to look at how can we keep young people connected to their community. According to the National Juvenile Justice Network, community-based interruptions are appropriate because they use evidence-based practices. They are accountable to the court regarding the progress of young people. They focus on strength-based models and incorporate an assessment of the whole child's needs. They engage family and utilize their strengths, help youth and families access community resources, but more importantly, provide ongoing long-term support. There are several people on this call today: Kareem Hines, Ardetta Scruggs, Sherry Oliver, Toby Patterson, and Voices, who this is what we do every day in, day out. We serve young people that the system tries to create new pathways to destroy, lock up, and forget about. We have got to focus on creating stronger pathways to success, destroying the school to prison pipeline, and finding opportunities for young people to be productive members of the community. And the only way to do that is to have them invested in that space. We can do that with community-based programs and interventions, but we cannot do that if the young people are stuck behind a cell. So I am proud to stand in alignment with everybody on this call today. I'm proud to be a representative of a very strong community-based program. And I'm here to just lend my voice to represent all of the young people that our legislators have seemed to forget about, but we can never forget about. And we are here to serve these young people through it all, through the good, the bad, and the ugly, in the trenches and in the schools. And so I just urge our legislators to take another look at what they're proposing and look at the damage, and find ways to partner with organizations like Voices, Bloom Project, New Boy, Inner Beauty, and so many more. So thank you all for having me today, and I look forward to continuing these conversations.
Thank you, Brandon. Really appreciate that. We need the perspective of youth service providers. And I think if you think back and reflect on all the voices you've heard today, I think I can speak for the coalition saying we very much appreciate hearing the insights and really voices that you don't often hear when we start talking about gun offenses. It appears that our public dialogue is often driven by fear instead of facts. And the voices here are just so important as we go down this road. Maddie, are there some more questions that we want to?
Yeah. First and foremost, thank you, everyone. This was fascinating, and I really appreciate everyone being on the call, and so that we can share this with our Indiana community. We have had a couple questions in the chat that have been answered already, but one is from our very own Phoenix, who states, why is it that we don't prosecute adults who are responsible for providing firearms to children the way we prosecute adults who serve alcohol to minors? Isn't the responsibility on the adult in both scenarios? So I think that speaks for itself, but I would like to hear some other commentary. And this is now, at this point, is open to our speakers to respond to, but anyone who feels strongly is also welcome. Once we get through a couple of questions that are posed in the chat, I would love for you to unmute yourself and to ask your questions directly in the 10 minutes that we have. Anyone want to take that one on?
I guess I could chime in on this one real quick. So directly on the question that Phoenix posed, there are statutes on the books which allow for the prosecution of adults who provide firearms to kids in ways that they shouldn't be having firearms. And so they're there, but I think the question is a broader question as far as, why aren't we actually following through and doing the prosecutions on the adults who do provide the firearms? Statistically speaking, I don't know what percentage of adults are brought into court who have provided a firearm to kids. But there is a complacency with law enforcement that I've seen from my experience as a public defender, that when they find a child with a firearm and they have a law that they can use to prosecute that person, that problem right in front of them, there's not really a big reason for them to look to that next step and try to actually, figure out what the root problem is and to go behind the scenes and track down where that firearm came from. It's a lot easier on police officers and prosecutors to just do that initial step to prosecute the kid that's in front of them and move on about their business and go on with other cases. So I suspect that that's what's happening in most instances. They catch the kid, they're able to prosecute the kid, and that's the end of the story. So it's concerning. Yes, these kids are getting guns from somewhere. And we've got to address that bigger, broader problem of who's funneling these guns into the community in large, if it's, and how they're getting to people that shouldn't have those guns. But there are statutes on the books that do provide a way to get at that problem. It's putting in the effort to do the work to make it happen.
Hey, Maddie. Also, just real quick, I think that is another example of why we have to promote holistic and two-generational healing from trauma. A lot of the adults who may be allowing access to guns for young people or providing them, a lot of those adults have not healed from their own trauma. And so a lot of times we want to protect youth. And so when we do that, we do want to put blame on somebody. The problem with trauma is if it goes unresolved, it will be passed on, replicated, and exaggerated. And so if we're not addressing family-centered healing, community-based healing, or holistic healing, we're only picking apart individual components, but that is not going to heal the entire program. It is simply putting a Band-Aid on the problem.
I also want to chime in on that. The way I look at adults and kids' interaction with guns is it's almost cultural, because if you go on YouTube right now, you can see there are adults teaching their kids right now how to shoot at targets and people. So it also comes from which background these kids are coming from and the type of parents that they have, because I don't know, even in the lifestyle that I grew up as a child, there was no grown person that would sell a kid a gun. It's almost unheard of. It's almost something that you would never, ever even see or hear. There's no adult that would do that. So there's obviously getting sold to an adult and passed to a kid, or the kids are having adults buy it for them. So either it's a lot of, it's very deep when we talk about the intertwining and the position of both and how they have.
Muted. Don, you're muted.
I'm sorry about that, these phone calls. But I really just feel it's a cultural thing that we have to break. We just got to get to the root of all problems. And the root is that we need to live together and we need to be together. We need to help each other. We need to teach each other's kids, each other's cultures, and we need to teach each other how to love one another. So in the end, it's just like a car kills a lot of people, but we're not necessarily filing cars to like, no, you can't have one. We teach safety behind the cars. So we need to do the same thing with the guns, and as well as with the adults. Adults need to be more safe with raising their kids. What are you teaching your kids? It's cultural to me. I'm sorry about that. That's what I want to chime in with.
Don, that's actually perfect and leads into the next question, is that like we're talking about teenagers here, but really like we should start very early. And so I know Kareem, maybe you're still on the call. Can you speak a little bit more on gun prevention mentoring in elementary and middle schools really quickly? Or Brandon? Is Kareem still with us?
Everyone, I appreciate
You sound like a robot.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, there you go. Yeah.
Is it Brandon?
Okay, now we can't. So Kareem actually reached out to Sarah and I earlier to talk about the new breed of youth, which is new BOY boy, Guns Down, Gloves Up youth boxing program, which is pretty cool. I'm so sorry, Kareem, we still can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah, we did it. Okay.
I apologize. You know, when we're doing these real time Zooms, we run into technical difficulties. I apologize. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I truly appreciate everyone's perspective on the issue. And I did send in the question to Ms. Maddie, and it was in regards to the prevention piece. I think Dante just spoke about it. And I just asked, were there any programs in the schools, the elementary and middle schools, that were provided that really addressed the prevention of gun violence, that really hammered down the consequences of illegal gun handling, exposure of guns to young people before they got into the juvenile justice system. And I'd mentioned our Guns Down, Gloves Up program, where it was a program that we bring into the school systems, but we also use for kids that are in the system, that addresses gun violence, the consequences of it, but also provides an outlet. A lot of our young men have a lot of trauma. They have a lot of aggression that has been built up over the course of their lives from coming from these disadvantaged neighborhoods that you guys talked about. And I just wanted to speak to the outlets that we're giving them to let this aggression out. And it doesn't start at 16 or 17. And I just wanted to know whether any programs in the elementary and middle schools that were focused on specifically gun prevention, not from a teacher perspective, but actually directly addressing and educating our young people about gun prevention and safety.
Maddie, how about Tiffany? Do you have an answer to that?
I'm sorry, Jonay, I was also in discussion with a colleague. Can you repeat?
Sure. The question is, are there currently any programs in the elementary and middle schools to intervene? Because we've got our older students and kids who are getting involved with the legal system, but if they have that preventative measure beforehand.
I cannot speak to schools and resources in schools particularly. What I can speak to is from a pediatric hospital perspective. I used to work at a pediatric hospital. So there is a lot of talk from pediatricians about firearm-related injury prevention being needed in pediatric offices during primary care appointments and also in emergency departments as children come in. Most of the discussion is around safe storage of firearms so that we don't have youth or young children who are unintentionally getting a hold of firearms and unintentionally causing injury to themselves or to others in their family. So it's mostly around storage. I don't know if it's around safe use as much as safe storage, but that is where the conversations have started to go in the pediatric world.
Perfect. Thanks, Tiffany. And we'll work on a more complete answer to that question. I'm going to be saving the chat for everyone, and we'll be reaching out to speakers so that we can kind of get a more comprehensive look at this for our press packet. I will share that link shortly, but I do want to leave an opportunity for anyone to ask the last couple questions. If our speakers can stay on for a couple more minutes, please. But if you have a question, go ahead and unmute yourself and let's hear it.
Maddie, I think Sarah wanted to say something.
Oh, sure.
Sorry, I was just going to add into another two-generational grassroots initiative that I've been really impressed with is the Great Communities 2020. And unfortunately, they're just local to Marion County, so not statewide. But they're doing really pretty amazing work with, they form a community plan and really build upon that. A lot of it has to do with health equity, depending on what the community's strengths and goals are. They might be addressing food equity, they might be addressing housing stability, but the purpose is exactly what Dante was talking about, is building strong communities to envelop these young people with opportunities to be mentored, to be guided, to be doing things that are positive with their time.
And this past weekend, we had an event with Voices, Bloom Project, New Boy, and Boys to Men, where we collaborated on a community-based discussion for young men between 13 and 19. And we had over 65 young men in that age demographic participate in a 2-hour-long conversation around gun violence, trauma, and healing. And we had a multitude of young people follow up and say that they wanted to have this as an ongoing event because they want spaces where they can talk about how they're feeling, how their emotions are being affirmed, and how they can connect with people in the community. So I feel like that's another opportunity, is to continue these collaborations and be intentional with spaces like that.
Okay, so it sounds like we have a couple people who want to respond really quickly. Is everyone cool with sticking on for just a little bit longer? If you're not, that's totally fine. We will be sending out a response email later, probably tomorrow, Johnny, right? So that we've got all the links ready to go for you and that you can respond to them. But let's first, Sandy, if you would like to go ahead and respond, and then Dawn, we can check in with you for your story.
Yes, I just wanted to say, as a school teacher and also homeschool advisor, it was a question about schools having programs. And I always found the school to be reactionary instead of proactive. Like when we found a young lady with a knife, she was going to be expelled. And she carried that knife because she was having to catch 2 buses in the dark to finish her senior year. I rarely use tears to get people out of trouble, but I begged and pleaded and asked for another chance. And this girl did graduate from high school. But we don't have programs unless it has changed to prevent things. They just respond as soon as someone is caught with a weapon. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandy. I appreciate you. Don, do you want to go ahead and share?
Well, it was something that is very personal, and just to give y'all an insight on what we're going through out here and what we have to do. I wasn't going to share this, but I see where the conversation is going. It's getting very personal. We all getting very close to what we know that we need to do and the insight and the look. So I don't have like a building or a group or anything, but I'm very much an advocate out here. I talk to a lot of kids. I'm always up at Washington High School, 63, 67. It's a lot of schools I deal with and talk to kids and kids that talk to me. This weekend at the park, I had to stop some young men from shooting each other. You know, just an argument, something that stirred all the way back from along like last summer. But the fact that it was so easy to stop them, but to see so much anger and violence in them, but they just didn't know how to let it out. They didn't know what to do, you know, and it was from what they seen or movies or whatever. But if there was no grown people out there to tell them, put that down. Like my man's on here said about the put the guns down, put the gloves up. If y'all so mad, then fight. Those you can't come back from. You know, and we eventually easily sent the boys on their way, made them put the stuff up, calm down. You know, this was in broad daylight at a park. They don't know no better. We got to stop prosecuting them like they do. They don't. And the police pulled up afterwards. I talked to them and I let them know exactly. Usually all the parks in Indianapolis are empty because y'all locking up all the grown men, the people that are pertaining to these young men, that are keeping them at a calm and teaching them what and what not to do. I said, luckily you had grown men out here today, because that could have been bad with all these kids out here enjoying the sun. So I just encourage those that are having these groups and teams to get out here, you know, talk to the young men you see, speak to them. Don't be afraid to say something to somebody, because from my experience and the reason why I do my work is they need it. They need it. So I just wanted to share that, just to give y'all some insight that this is ongoing daily, you know, and it just takes us to acknowledge it and to step in between it. You know, hey, this is how this goes, because they don't know. So I just wanted to give that out there.
Maddie, I just want to jump in. Thank you for that, Don. I see from Sarah Stelzner, she asked me to at least make a comment about the training that we do, the Positive School Discipline Institute. And I think it follows up on what Sandy Parker had just mentioned, that school programs are so often reactive and not preventive. And the Positive School Discipline Institute, we've been training schools across the state on culturally responsive trauma-informed practices. And it's really led by, you know, the principal, and it has a team, cross-disciplinary team that really starts to look at, you know, how can they have a culture shift within their schools that embraces best practices. And so anyway, if you are interested, if you know schools that are expelling kids or have high suspension rates, you might check out our website. We will have another cohort this summer. And what we have found is that schools that go down this road, it's a journey. It doesn't happen in 1 year. And that they acquire resources and understanding that actually can be potentially transformative. So if you're at all interested, either reach out to me or go to our website. Sorry about that. Pretty long.
No, you're fine. That's perfect. Thanks, Phoenix, for putting that in the chat, and thanks, Johnny, for that, and for Sarah for referencing it. We've got to go soon, so I just wanted to give Cheryl an opportunity. She mentioned that she wanted to speak on what we were just talking about. If you are media here currently, you've got my information. We can connect after this, and I can connect you with some of the speakers should you wish. So Cheryl, close us out, honey.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
I want to thank you, Don. I live in Gary, Indiana, and we had a community group called Enough is Enough.
Amen.
And I would like to say that they are not, my son, for instance, did not purchase a gun. He took it out of my house. His statement was, Mom, if I don't speak to these people, I'll use that word, they gonna kill me. And what he was talking about was his peers. So it is a huge problem. And we had to stop and shut down a house that opened by a school to recruit young men in gangs. So it is a come out the walls situation. And I'm so passionate about this. So I just wanted to thank you for giving your perspective, because it is our communities that's suffering. My son ended up killing someone, and it's a long story, but he got 48 years. So I need, he didn't do it as a juvenile, but he succumbed to the fear.
The trauma. I know.
Yeah.
Trust me, I know it. I know that pain. I know it.
Yes. So that's all I want to comment on, is that I will do anything I can to help prevent this from happening to anyone else's child. That's it.
Thank you for sharing that, Cheryl. That's a very powerful story. Can you put your information in the chat so we can stay in touch for our coalition? Because you would be perfect for the work that we're doing right now. So unless anyone, Shannon.
Hi, could I just chime in really quickly about a next step that I want to put on everyone's radar? I'm Shannon O'Toole. I'm a public defender here in Marion County Juvenile Court. I've been in the juvenile court for over a decade now, advocating for kids with these kinds of charges. And I co-chair the decriminalization of youth CPLI work group. And I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to an upcoming date. I posted it in the chat. Next Tuesday at 10 a.m., the Senate Corrections and Criminal Law Committee will be hearing 1256. And what this means is we can show up, give testimony, like many of you have done today in this press conference, and speak directly to our legislators as they are poised to make decisions about this bill. So over the course of the next week, after today, it's not done. We still have work to do on this, and there are still opportunities for us to speak directly to our legislators. And so, today in listening to all of these experts and community members and everyone come together and speak their wisdom and their truths, this is powerful. And we need to continue to present our legislators with this information and wisdom and truth. And so over the next week, Janae, if folks are interested in either submitting a written or appearing in person at the State House to give your statement like you gave today or have more to say, Janae, would it be okay, could folks put their information in the chat so that we can, or reach out directly to either of us, so that we can make sure that we collaborate over the next week to present testimony at the committee as much as they'll let us know.
Right. Yes, absolutely. If you would like to participate in any way legislatively, please put your name and organization in the chat. Contact information. We have a call-in, this press conference will kick off a call-in this afternoon. And I believe, Phoenix, are you still on the line? Could you put some of that information in the chat that went out with the legislative alert? We're asking people to call the committees that are going to hear this bill. And so there's a lot each of us can do right now, even if you don't have time to do it this afternoon. Anytime you can find to reach out to the chairs of the two committees, one's in the Senate, one's in the House, Mike Young in the Senate, and Wendy McNamara in the House, and their committee members. This will make a big difference in what kind of impact we have. So I don't know if Phoenix is still on. Phoenix, are you trying to find those documents?
I can see. Actually, I haven't been able to see Phoenix this whole time. I was surprised to see him in the chat. So I'm going to find that really quickly to share. But I also want to share the link that I've got for our press packet, of course, and Ashley, you will appreciate this. Of course, our update for our website happened at the exact same time, so it might not be working currently. But here is the press packet file. Everyone who RSVP to this event will receive a notification that this is in fact live. So I apologize for the delay, but let me see. I will also send that information with that link if Phoenix is not currently on still. Yeah.
We do have email addresses, so I would recommend that we send the information out.
Absolutely. So we're going to go ahead and close out. John A., if you want to make last remarks while I find that flyer really quickly to share, that would be great.
Absolutely. Well, we want to thank all of our individuals that have shared today, our national resources that helped us understand these issues better, and the public defenders that are really on the front lines of trying to make sure that we improve the lives of children in our state. We want to thank you all, and please keep in touch with us. The legislative session is now at a critical point. We know what bills are going to have some momentum, and it's up to us now to use this time to try to impact in a positive way what comes out of the session this year. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Senate Bill 368, which is a really good bill. And it did get out of the Senate and it's going into the House. And we want to make sure Wendy McNamara will hear that bill. It would actually, it would actually improve the rights of children by dealing with getting children out of adult facilities pre-trial. It would ensure that we have a statute that ensures that that provides juvenile competency to stand trial, a process so that we make sure that kids who are not competent don't get tried within the juvenile justice system, but rather have services. And then finally, automatic expungement for misdemeanors. This is the right way, it's the right step in the right direction. And we got to make sure that we're giving our youth the best step up transitioning into adulthood. So anyway, we really appreciate all of you. Please stay in contact, and we'll see you soon, hopefully.
Thanks, everyone. The handout is in the chat, and we're ready to go. Thank you so much for signing on. If you have any questions, you've got our information. We're happy to chat with you.
Thank you.